Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Buckle up, because today we're taking a trip. We're going to journey through the body and see what happens when we drink alcohol.
Ooh, I like that. A journey.
Exactly. It's going to be fascinating.
And probably pretty surprising for some people.
Yeah, maybe we'll even bust a few myths along the way.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with this? Like, what actually happens when we take that first sip of a drink?
Well, it all starts right there in the mouth. But here's something that might surprise you. Some of that alcohol actually starts getting absorbed right there.
Whoa, wait, really?
Yep. Right through the mucous membranes.
Huh. I always thought it all went straight to the stomach.
Most of it does, but a little bit sneaks in right there in the mouth. And get this. If you're drinking something fizzy, like a cocktail with soda or something,
Oh, yeah.
the gas in those drinks can actually speed up that absorption process.
So it's like a faster track for the booze to get into my system.
You got it.
Uh-huh.
But don't worry, the majority of the alcohol still ends up in the stomach,
Okay, good to know.
where it mixes with all those lovely gastric juices.
Yeah, lovely. But this is where I've always heard that food comes into play.
Absolutely.
If you eat something before you start drinking, or even while you're drinking,
Smart move.
it's supposed to help slow down the effects of the alcohol. Is that actually true?
It is. When you have food in your stomach, it sort of mixes in with the alcohol, and that slows down the trip to the small intestine.
Ah, I see. So it's like building a little dam to slow the flow.
Exactly. And that's important because the small intestine, that's where most of that alcohol is going to get absorbed into your bloodstream.
Okay, so it's like the superhighway from your gut to your blood.
Pretty much.
And once it's in the bloodstream, that's when I really start to feel it right.
Bingo. The alcohol starts traveling all over your body,
Makes sense.
and eventually it
Consistency.
reaches the main attraction, the brain.
Okay, but before we get to all the fun brain stuff,
Right.
we got to talk about the liver. It's always been kind of mysterious to me. Everyone says it breaks down alcohol, but what does that even mean? Can you break that down for me?
Haha. All right, well, think of your liver like a hardworking filter constantly working to clean up your blood. It's like a detox center working around the clock.
I like that image.
And when you drink alcohol, the liver kicks into overdrive to break down all that alcohol into less harmful stuff.
So it's like it's really earning its keep when we're out having a good time.
For sure. But here's the thing. Even the hardest working liver has its limits.
Oh.
It can only process about one standard drink per hour.
Okay, so if I have more than one drink per hour, what happens to the rest?
Well, if you exceed your liver's processing speed limit, all that extra alcohol starts building up in your bloodstream.
I see.
And that's when you start to feel the effects, that tipsy or drunk feeling.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So pacing myself is key if I don't want to get too drunk too fast.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get to the good stuff. What's going on in my brain when all that alcohol arrives?
Here's where things get really interesting. So alcohol, it acts as a central nervous system depressant.
The depressant. So it's like hitting the brakes on my brain.
You got it. And when those brakes get applied, it can have all sorts of effects on your thoughts, your emotions, even your movements.
Like that feeling of relaxation after a drink or two.
That's one of the first things people notice for sure, because alcohol suppresses those control centers in your brain,
Ah, interesting.
which can make you feel less inhibited, more outgoing.
Right.
But remember that initial happy-go-lucky phase? That's really just the beginning of the story.
So what happens after that initial buzz wears off?
Well, as alcohol continues to work its magic, your memory might start to get a little fuzzy.
Oh, yeah.
Your attention span, gone.
Uh-huh. Yep, been there.
And making smart decisions, forget about it,
Oh, man. So like alcohol throws a wrench into my brain's control panel.
basically. And remember that part of your brain that helps you balance and coordinate all your movements. Alcohol messes with that too.
Explains a lot.
That's why even a couple drinks can make you clumsy and uncoordinated.
Yeah, that would be why I can't seem to walk straight after a few drinks.
Exactly. And then there's the slurred words, the jumbled sentences,
Oh, yeah, good times.
all thanks to alcohol's effect on the areas of your brain that control speech and language.
So it affects pretty much everything, huh?
Pretty much. It's pretty incredible how much happens inside our bodies after just a few sips of alcohol.
Seriously. We've gone from the mouth to the stomach to the bloodstream, and now we're seeing all of the action in the brain.
And the journey isn't over yet. Believe it or not, alcohol's effects go way beyond the brain.
Oh, really?
It impacts other organs too.
All right, well, let's dive into that. What other parts of my body are feeling the effects of all this alcohol?
Well, for starters, your heart definitely feels it.
Okay.
It can cause your heart rate and blood pressure to go up.
Yikes. What about my kidneys? Do they get involved in this party too?
Oh yeah, your kidneys are constantly working to filter your blood, and when you drink alcohol, they have to work overtime.
I see.
It makes you pee more, which can lead to dehydration.
So basically, alcohol is making me pee out all the water my body needs.
Yep, pretty much.
Okay, and what about my poor stomach? It's got to be feeling the brunt of all this drinking, right?
Your stomach is definitely on the front lines here.
I can imagine.
Alcohol can really irritate the lining of your stomach, which leads to that lovely nausea and even vomiting.
Not so lovely. Is there anything alcohol doesn't mess with?
Haha. Well, one more organ to mention is the pancreas.
Oh, yeah.
That's a gland that's super important for digestion.
Right.
And if you drink too much, it can get inflamed, a condition called pancreatitis.
Pancreatitis.
Yeah, and that one's no joke. It can be pretty serious.
Okay, so alcohol is basically wreaking havoc on my insides.
It can definitely do some damage if you're not careful.
Noted. Speaking of unpleasant side effects, let's talk about the dreaded hangover.
Ah, yes, the unwelcome guest after a night of overindulgence.
The worst.
That pounding headache, the nausea, the fatigue, the thirst.
Oh, don't remind me.
Those are all classic signs of a hangover.
It's like my body's way of saying, hey, you had a little too much fun last night?
Exactly. And those symptoms are caused by a combination of things: dehydration, stomach irritation, and those lingering chemical changes in the brain.
Right.
Remember how we talked about the liver's processing limit?
Yeah, about 1 drink per hour.
Right. Well, exceeding that limit, that's a surefire way to earn yourself a nasty hangover.
So it's like a gentle reminder to pace myself throughout the night.
Exactly. But hey, you know what? Let's take this exploration one step further and really get into the nitty-gritty of brain alcohol chemistry.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
Let's zoom in on the molecular level and see what's really happening when alcohol enters the picture.
Awesome. So what's going on in my brain at that microscopic level when I'm having a few drinks?
Well, alcohol, it actually interacts with specific neurotransmitters.
Neurotransmitters.
Those are basically like the messengers in your brain.
Okay.
And when alcohol comes along, it throws a wrench in their communication system.
Okay, I'm listening.
So one of the main players here is GABA.
GABA.
It's an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Basically, think of it like the brake pedal in your brain.
I like that.
It slows things down, promotes relaxation,
Ah, okay.
and alcohol actually boosts GABA activity.
So that's why I feel more relaxed and less anxious after a drink or two.
Exactly. Your brain is hitting the brakes on those stress signals.
Makes sense.
But here's the thing. Alcohol also interferes with another neurotransmitter called glutamate.
Glutamate. What does that one do?
Well, glutamate is kind of the opposite of GABA. It's an excitatory neurotransmitter, more like a gas pedal in your brain.
Okay.
It helps with learning and memory, and unfortunately, alcohol inhibits glutamate's activity.
Wait, so alcohol is like hitting the brakes with GABA and taking my foot off the gas with glutamate.
You got it. And all that disruption in communication between your brain cells,
Yeah.
that leads to those alcohol-induced memory lapses.
Oh, it's all starting to come together now. What about dopamine, though? That's the pleasure and reward neurotransmitter, right?
Ah, dopamine. Alcohol definitely increases dopamine release.
So that's where that feeling of euphoria comes from.
Bingo! It's like your brain is getting a surge of happy chemicals.
Ah, I knew it. So what's the catch? There's got to be a downside to all this dopamine, right?
Well, the dopamine rush can be tricky
How so?
because it reinforces alcohol consumption. It's like your brain is saying, hey, this feels good, let's do it again.
So it's like a positive feedback loop that could lead to problems.
Exactly. And while you're riding that dopamine high, alcohol is actually throwing another neurotransmitter off balance, serotonin.
Serotonin.
Serotonin. Yep, that's the one involved in regulating mood, sleep, and appetite.
Right.
And when alcohol disrupts serotonin balance, well, that's where the mood swings and the anxiety can come in.
Anxiety. What's that?
You know that feeling of anxiety and even depression that can sometimes hit during a hangover?
Oh, yeah.
That's anxiety, and it's not fun.
Definitely not.
Serotonin plays a big role in that.
So basically, alcohol is setting off a chain reaction in my brain, messing with all these different neurotransmitters.
Pretty much. It's a complex interplay of effects that impacts your mood, your behavior, your ability to think clearly.
It's incredible how much is going on in there after just a few drinks.
It is. And speaking of how your body adapts to alcohol, let's talk about tolerance and dependence.
Okay, yeah. I've heard that people who drink regularly can develop tolerance to alcohol. What does that actually mean?
Tolerance develops when your body basically gets used to alcohol being around,
Okay.
and it becomes less sensitive to its effects.
So I might need to drink more to feel the same buzz.
Exactly. But tolerance can be a slippery slope because it can sometimes lead to dependence.
What's the difference between tolerance and dependence?
Dependence is when your body becomes physically reliant on alcohol to function normally.
Oh, wow, that sounds serious.
It is. If someone who's dependent on alcohol suddenly stops drinking, they'll experience withdrawal symptoms.
Like what kind of symptoms?
It can range from mild anxiety and tremors to more severe things like seizures and even delirium tremens.
Delirium tremens.
Yeah, it's a pretty serious condition that can actually be life-threatening.
Wow, that's a scary thought.
It is. It really highlights how powerful alcohol's hold on the body can be.
This is all very sobering information. Literally. I had no idea there was so much going on behind the scenes when it comes to alcohol and how it affects my body.
It's a lot more complex than most people realize.
That's for sure. Understanding how it works can help us make smarter choices about our drinking habits.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power.
I'm definitely rethinking my relationship with alcohol after all this.
That's great to hear.
But before we move on, can we lighten things up a bit with those fun facts and anecdotes you mentioned earlier? I could use a break from all this serious science.
Of course. Did you know that the ancient Romans believed wine was a gift from the gods?
Really? That's fascinating. Tell me more.
Well, wine played a huge role in Roman culture.
I can imagine.
They drank tons of it at banquets and celebrations. They even had a god of wine named Bacchus.
Wow, so the love of a good drink has been around for centuries.
It certainly has. And speaking of drinks, have you ever heard of the Bloody Mary cocktail?
Sure, it's a classic French drink.
It is, and it's rumored to help with hangovers.
Oh yeah, I've heard that. Is there any truth to that?
Well, it's thought that the mix of tomato juice, vodka, lemon juice, Worcestershire sauce, hot sauce, and spices might help rehydrate you and replenish electrolytes,
Oh,
which can get depleted after a night of drinking.
there's like a multi-pronged attack on the hangover.
Exactly. Whether it actually works is up for debate, but it's a fun piece of cocktail lore.
And it's delicious, hangover or not.
Absolutely. What other fascinating alcohol tidbits do you have for me?
Hit me with it.
Okay, how about this? That classic alcohol breath smell, it doesn't actually come from the alcohol itself.
Really? So where does it come from?
It comes from acetate.
Acetate.
Yep. It's a byproduct of alcohol metabolism in the liver.
Wow, so it's not the alcohol we're smelling, but one of its metabolites.
Exactly.
That's pretty wild. Okay, last one, I promise. What about the long-term effects of alcohol on the brain? Like what happens when someone drinks heavily over a long period of time?
Well, studies have shown that alcohol can actually impair the formation of new neurons in the hippocampus.
The hippocampus.
Yep. That's a part of the brain that's crucial for learning and memory.
So it's not just about those short-term memory lapses we talked about.
Nope. Excessive drinking can actually have a lasting impact on brain function.
Wow. That's definitely something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we've covered so much in this first part of our deep dive into the body's response to alcohol.
We have?
From that very first sip to the intricate world of neurotransmitters in the brain.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. And we've only just scratched the surface. There's still so much more to explore.
Absolutely.
Join us for the next part of this deep dive as we continue to unravel this fascinating and complex relationship between our bodies and alcohol.
See you there. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of alcohol.
I'm ready for more. Last time we went through that initial journey of alcohol through the body, that first sip to the brain, and all the stops along the way.
Right. And we talked about how alcohol can really mess with those neurotransmitters in the brain.
Yeah, it's definitely more complicated than I ever realized.
It is. But today, I think it's time to shift gears a little bit and talk about what happens in the long term.
Ooh. Okay, like the long-term consequences of drinking.
Exactly. Because things can get pretty serious when alcohol becomes a regular thing in our lives.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So let's dive into those long-term effects. What are some of the biggest risks associated with chronic alcohol use?
Well, remember how we talked about the liver working so hard to process all that alcohol?
Yeah, like it's a little processing plant.
Right. Well, if you keep pushing it to the limit over time, it can really take a toll.
Like what kind of damage are we talking about?
Well, it can lead to a whole range of liver problems.
Like,
Fatty liver disease, that's where fat builds up in the liver.
ugh,
Then there's alcoholic hepatitis, which is inflammation of the liver.
oh no.
And in really serious cases, it can even lead to cirrhosis.
Cirrhosis? That sounds scary. What is that exactly?
Imagine your liver is like a filter, right? Cleaning your blood, removing toxins.
Right.
Cirrhosis is basically scarring of the liver.
Scarring.
Yeah, and that scarring messes up its structure and how well it can do its job.
So it's like the filter gets all clogged up.
Pretty much. And that's a big deal because the liver does so many important things in the body.
Right.
Filtering toxins, producing bile for digestion, and when it can't do those things well,
Yeah.
it can lead to liver failure, which can be really dangerous.
That's a pretty serious consequence. So it's not just about feeling bad the next morning. It can actually cause lasting damage.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's not just the liver either. Chronic alcohol abuse also puts you at higher risk for heart problems.
Oh, man. What kind of heart problems?
Remember how we talked about alcohol causing a temporary increase in heart rate and blood pressure?
Yeah, those short-term effects.
Well, over time, that can actually weaken the heart muscle itself,
Oh, wow.
leading to a condition called alcoholic cardiomyopathy.
Alcoholic cardiomyopathy.
Yeah, it's basically when the heart muscle gets all weak and floppy.
And that's bad because...
Well, when your heart muscle is weak, it can't pump blood as efficiently,
Oh.
which increases the risk of heart failure.
So there's like a domino effect.
Eh,
One thing leads to another, and it just keeps getting worse.
right. And unfortunately, the risks don't stop there. Long-term alcohol abuse is also linked to an increased risk of certain types of cancer.
Cancer.
Seriously.
I know, it's scary stuff. Studies have shown that heavy alcohol use is associated with a higher risk of cancers of the mouth, throat, esophagus, liver, breast, and even colorectal cancer.
Wow, that's a lot of different cancers. It really seems like alcohol can affect almost every part of the body.
It's true. It doesn't discriminate. And while we've been focusing on the physical effects, we can't forget about the mental health consequences either.
Right, alcohol can definitely mess with your mood and emotions. How does that play out in the long term?
Well, chronic alcohol use can actually make existing mental health conditions like depression and anxiety even worse.
And for some people, it can even contribute to the development of new mental health problems.
Yeah, that's rough. So it's like a double whammy. You're dealing with the physical effects and the mental health effects.
Right. And we also can't forget about the social and interpersonal consequences of alcohol abuse.
Yeah, like relationship problems, domestic violence, job loss.
Exactly. Alcohol can play a huge role in all of those things. And those are problems that extend far beyond the individual.
They affect families, communities, society as a whole. It's a ripple effect.
It is. And it can be really devastating.
Before we move on to talking about responsible drinking, I have a question.
Sure.
We've been talking about all these negative effects, but I've also heard that there might be some health benefits to moderate alcohol consumption.
Ah, yeah, that's a popular topic.
Like the whole a glass of red wine a day is good for
Yeah.
you thing. Is there any truth to that?
That's a great question, and it's one that researchers are still trying to figure out. There have been some studies that suggest that moderate alcohol consumption, particularly of red wine, might have some cardiovascular benefits.
So maybe there is something to that red wine thing.
Possibly. Red wine contains antioxidants like resveratrol, which are thought to be good for the heart,
Interesting.
but it's really important to note that the research is mixed on this.
So it's not a guarantee.
Not at all. And any potential benefits are likely to be small.
Okay, so it's not an excuse to start drinking every day.
Definitely not. And it's always a good idea to talk to your doctor before making any decisions about alcohol, especially if you have any health conditions.
Good advice. So let's shift gears now and talk about strategies for responsible drinking. How can we enjoy alcohol safely and minimize those risks?
Well, the first and most important thing is knowing your limits and setting boundaries.
So like before I even go out to a party or a bar, I should already have a plan.
Exactly. Decide in advance how much you're comfortable drinking.
Okay.
And once you've set those limits, stick to them. Don't let anyone pressure you into drinking more than you want to.
It's about being in control of my own choices.
Exactly. And another key strategy is pacing yourself.
Right, we talked about that 1 drink per hour guideline.
Right. But it's important to remember that everyone's liver processes alcohol at a slightly different rate.
So what works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. Things like body size, metabolism, genetics, they all play a role.
So someone who's smaller might feel the effects of alcohol more quickly than someone who's larger.
Right. And women generally metabolize alcohol differently than men, so they tend to feel the effects faster, too.
Yeah, interesting. So it's not just about the number of drinks, it's about being aware of my own body and how it responds to alcohol.
Exactly. And here are a few more tips for pacing yourself. Sip your drinks slowly, savor the flavors, alternate alcoholic drinks with water or non-alcoholic options.
So no more gulping down shots.
Uh-huh. Probably best to avoid that. And eating food while you're drinking can also help.
How so?
It slows down the alcohol absorption,
Oh, okay.
keeps your blood alcohol levels from spiking too quickly.
So it's like I'm giving my body more time to process everything.
Exactly. And remember, it's always okay to say no to alcohol altogether.
Really? even if everyone else is drinking.
Absolutely. You don't have to drink to have a good time.
True.
There are plenty of other ways to enjoy yourself dancing, playing games, just having good conversation.
I guess I just sometimes feel pressured to drink in social situations, even if I don't really feel like it.
I get it. But true friends will respect your decision whether you choose to drink or not.
That's good to remember.
And if you do choose to drink, always be mindful of your surroundings and your own behavior. Alcohol can lower inhibitions, so it's important to stay aware of your actions and avoid risky situations.
Like driving under the influence.
Exactly. Never drink and drive. Always have a designated driver or take a cab or a ride share.
Safety first.
Always. What about those times when you're tempted to drink to cope with stress or difficult emotions?
Oh, yeah. I've definitely been there. Sometimes a drink seems like an easy way to unwind, but is that really a healthy approach?
It's a common trap, but it's important to remember that alcohol is a depressant.
Right.
While it might seem like it's relieving stress in the moment, it can actually make things worse in the long run.
So it's not a real solution.
Nope. It's more like a temporary escape that doesn't address the root of the problem.
So instead of reaching for a drink, I should be reaching out for support from friends, family, or maybe even a therapist.
Exactly. Those are the resources that can actually help you deal with stress and difficult emotions in a healthy way.
That's good advice.
No.
And what if someone realizes that their drinking habits are becoming a problem? Like they're having trouble controlling how much they drink? What should they do?
That's a great question, and it's important to remember that there's no shame in asking for help.
Right.
There are tons of resources available, support groups, therapy, rehab programs.
Okay.
Recovery is possible, and there are people who care and want to help.
That's good to know. This whole deep dive into the world of alcohol has been really eye-opening.
It's a complex topic for sure.
We've covered so much: the immediate effects, the long-term consequences, strategies for responsible drinking.
It's been quite a journey.
But we're not done yet. In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to tackle some of the most common myths and misconceptions about alcohol.
Get ready for some myth busting. We're going to separate fact from fiction.
Welcome back to our final deep dive into the world of alcohol. I feel like we've already learned so much.
We have, but we're not done yet.
Right. We still need to tackle those myths and misconceptions about alcohol.
Ooh, yeah, those are always fun.
I know, right? Like there's so many things people say about drinking and hangovers, and I'm never sure what's true and what's not.
We'll get ready to have some of those myths busted because we're going to get to the bottom of it all.
Awesome. So let's start with one of the most common ones I've heard. Mixing different types of alcohol makes you more drunk. Like that whole grape or grain, but never the twain thing.
Ah, yes, the infamous mixing myth.
Is there any truth to that?
Not really. It's a popular belief, but there's no scientific evidence to support it.
Really? So it doesn't matter if I have beer, then wine, then tequila.
Nope. Your body doesn't really care about the specific type of alcohol.
Okay.
It just processes the ethanol content.
So it's all about the total amount of alcohol I consume.
Exactly. Whether you stick to one drink all night or mix it up, it's the total amount that matters.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess I just always assumed that mixing drinks would lead to a wilder ride.
Like a common misconception. Okay, how about this one? Can coffee really sober you up after a night of drinking?
Oh yeah, that's another one I've heard a lot.
So many people believe that, but unfortunately, it's just not true.
What? So coffee doesn't actually help?
I mean, it might make you feel more alert
Yeah.
and maybe mask some of that drowsiness.
Right.
But it doesn't actually speed up the way your body processes alcohol.
So there's no magic coffee cure for being drunk.
Nope. The only true cure is time.
Time and maybe a greasy breakfast.
Uh-huh, maybe. Okay, are you ready for another myth?
Hit me with it.
All right, how about this one? Drinking beer before liquor gives you a worse hangover than drinking liquor before beer.
Oh yeah, I've heard that one too.
Another popular belief that's not actually backed up by science.
So the order doesn't matter.
Not really. Again, it all comes back to that total alcohol intake.
It always comes back to that, huh?
It does. It's the biggest factor in how you feel the next day.
Okay, speaking of hangovers, is it true that a big breakfast can cure a hangover?
Oh man, I wish. I always hope that a plate of bacon and eggs will magically erase the consequences of my decisions.
Uh-huh. I feel that. While food can definitely help settle your stomach and replenish some nutrients, it won't magically cure the hangover.
So it's more about symptom management than a true cure.
Exactly. A hangover is basically your body's way of saying, hey, you overdid it, and now we need to clean up the mess.
Makes sense.
There's no quick fix for that. You just have to rehydrate, rest, and let your body recover.
Okay, so water, sleep, and time are the real hangover cures. Those are the best remedies. And while we're on the topic of hangover cures, we have to address the myth of hair of the dog.
Hair of the dog.
Yeah, the idea that drinking more alcohol the next morning will help alleviate your hangover symptoms.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one. It
Huh?
always seemed counterintuitive to me.
Right. If alcohol caused the problem in the first place, how could more alcohol be the solution?
It's like fighting fire with fire.
Exactly. And while it might temporarily make you feel better by boosting your mood and easing withdrawal, it's really just delaying the inevitable.
It's like hitting the snooze button on a hangover alarm clock.
Perfect analogy. You're just postponing the pain.
So the best way to deal with the hangover is to just ride it out and let my body do its thing.
That's the healthiest approach. Okay, one last myth I want to debunk. The idea that some people are just good drinkers.
Oh, yeah, like they can handle their alcohol better than others.
Right. But that's a dangerous misconception.
Really? So even if someone seems like they can drink a lot without getting too drunk, they're still at risk.
Absolutely. While things like body size, metabolism, and genetics can influence someone's tolerance to alcohol, everyone is susceptible to its effects.
So there's no such thing as being immune to alcohol.
Nope. It's a powerful substance that affects everyone. It's just that some people might be better at hiding the effects.
I see. So it's important to remember that even if someone seems fine on the outside, they might still be experiencing negative consequences that we can't see.
Exactly. It's like the tip of the iceberg. What we see might just be a small part of the story.
That's a good way to put it.
So it's crucial to be mindful of our own drinking habits and recognize our limits.
For sure.
Everyone's relationship with alcohol is different.
I think we've officially busted some major alcohol myths today.
Mission accomplished.
It's amazing how much misinformation is out there.
It is.
But hopefully our listeners are now armed with the knowledge to make more informed decisions about their drinking.
That's the goal. We've covered so much in this deep dive.
I know, right? It's been a wild ride.
From that first sip to those persistent myths and everything in between.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of alcohol and how it affects my body.
That's awesome to hear.
A huge thank you to everyone for joining us on this journey.
Cheers.
And remember, drink responsibly and be safe out there.